Okay, so what we have here is basically Dolby Atmos inside of Alva Sorcerer. So it's 3D audio with animation, with keyframes, with paths, and you have basically unlimited number of speakers, and you can add the speakers wherever you want. And oh, these are locked, but you can basically put the speakers wherever you want and in three-dimensional space in order to accurately reflect your room, because you might not have your speakers in exactly the right position. You might have speakers just wherever, and you're trying to sort of kind of come up with some form of 3D audio. And now you can, because you have, this system that allows you to put the speakers in the software wherever they are in your room. So over here, this is kind of different from Dolby Atmos or any other 3D rendering software. You have a bunch of sound files. Each of these sound files represents speakers, and each of these are going to render out separately as individual audio files that are going to be played back by QLab, and they're all going to go into a group queue inside QLab, and each of those files is going to be set to go to a different speaker, to a different output on the USB sound card. And then this one down here is the one that you're going to listen to inside Blender to know where you're at in the sound effect. And this one is sort of providing audio to all of these. So this one is connected to, when you go to Alva Sorcerer Sequencer, you see this audio tab, and then you have this enumerator here. This one we're going to say is represents an audio object that's going to be connected to an empty inside 3D view, which is this guy over here. That's this right here, sound source. It's an empty, we can move it wherever we want. And then when we move this across, we can select these guys and have them, look at where the empty is located and where they're located in relation to the empty, and figure out where their volume should be. So you can see how all these volume monitors change based on that location. And each of these monitors represent a strip, and each of these strips are connected to one of the speakers out in the scene. So this one is FTL, so front top left. That's going to be this one, I believe, or maybe this one. Yeah, FTL right there. So as the empty approaches that speaker, what did I do? Where's the empty? There it is. As the empty approaches that speaker, FTL will go up, and as it goes away, FTL will go down. So we're basically right on top of FTL right now, so it's at full. And if we want a certain speaker to be less sensitive, we can just go into the speaker. That one's FTL, so that's FTL. We can change the sensitivity down to a little bit lower, but I'm going to set them all at 0.5 for right now so that they're all consistent. And then if we want to change the size of the audio object, we can do that with this, changing the size like so. It doesn't have a visual representation with the sphere being drawn around it yet, but it will in the future. You have that in Dolby Atmos, you don't have that over here yet. So a big drawback of this is that you can't do multiple objects at once very easily. You can, but it's a lot of workload to do multiple at one time. You can do two pretty easily at one time, but if you do more than that, it's going to be a lot of work. So it's fairly primitive in that regard. However, you can do stuff with this that you cannot do with Dolby Atmos. You can do really advanced motion paths with it, and you can put the speakers wherever you want, and you can have however many speakers you want. Another thing you can do with this is, if you select one of the speaker strips, you can go down to this section here, OSC address. This basically is there to allow you to connect a speaker strip to a mixer via OSC, so that when you do this kind of stuff, or this kind of stuff, you can see that being reflected on the faders, if they're motorized faders, on the soundboard. I don't have a mixer here in order to demonstrate that, but that's basically what this is. And you use the same sort of syntax, the same like hashtag symbol, money sign symbol to fill in like the fader number and the actual volume number. That's basically the same as over here where you have like the hashtag for like channel number, group number, and then the money sign for the intensity value or strobe value or whatever. So it's the same as over at the lighting system. On this system you have a bake audio function which must be done before you go to export each track. When you hit this button, it creates keyframes on the actual volume of each frame inside the sequence. So you'll see this starts dropping down, and each frame is yellow because that means there's a keyframe on each of these frames. If it were green, that means it's keyframed but not on this frame. If it's gray, that means it's not keyframed at all. So I'll clear keyframes, that's gray. And if I were to say hit I, it's keyframed on this one. Now it's going to go green because it's not keyframed on this one, but it's keyframed on that one. So I'll undo that. Or let's not undo that. Let's say go back down to Sequencer and say bake audio. It's going to take a couple seconds. Okay. And now we'll go back up to strip and see that it is keyframed. And because I changed the location of this, it changed it a little bit. But now you'll see that it has keyframes on each individual frame, which means when we go to export this to QLab, all of that data is going to be on the actual file. And it is important that you make sure that everything but that file, but the strip is muted, because the Blender mixdown function will take all audio in the scene that is not muted. So we need to mute everything other than the specific channel that we're exporting right now. So what you would do when you're done and ready to export to QLab is you would solo track and then hit the export button and save to whatever the file name is, wherever it should go. So that's when you're done. That's how you get this audio out to production environment. And the OSC stuff is there for when you want to, have real-time monitoring, because this does not output audio. It can do like left-right stereo mix, but it's definitely not going to output 3D audio, definitely not for like a 3D 6-plane sound system. And that's what this is with the floor speakers. There's no theater anywhere that has floor speakers, but this is just to demonstrate what you can do with this. If you wanted to have floor speakers and have that rendered into your audio environment, you can. So there's two main drawbacks with this. One is you can't do multiple objects at the same time very easily. You can, but just not very easily. And then the other drawback is you don't have the same spatial processing that Dolby Atmos does. It's not going to calculate and predict where all the wave intersections are. So it doesn't have all. If you're sitting in the room, there's going to be places where it sounds good and there's going to be places where it sounds bad, because it's not doing a whole bunch of processing in the background to cancel out all the phasing issues that you have when you have so many speakers in the same room. So it's not as advanced in that respect. It's not going to sound as good as a really good version of Dolby Atmos will, but in exchange you get hyper customizability, extremely high customizability, and very low barrier to entrance. Because you could set this up in your garage no problem. If you had a mixer, if you have QLab. So this does not connect to timecode. It doesn't connect to a DAW. It doesn't connect to anything external. It just outputs audio files that QLab plays back in a group. So like you don't have to set up a bunch of stuff. You don't have to connect a bunch of different softwares together. It's just stupid simple, very easy to set up, and hyper customizable. And it's already connected to your lighting system. So for example, I can go over into lighting and deselect that and hit add animation. Say this is going to be group 2, whatever. and set this to motion paths, and then select that same empty in the scene, that same sound source empty. And now group 2 is going to track that same empty so that you can have sort of a lighting audio object that sort of moves throughout the scene. And the mover tracks the audio object. That's definitely not something you can do with any other system other than Alva Sorcerer, and that's why I built Alva Sorcerer.